Bueno, hola, ¿qué tal? Les doy la bienvenida a un nuevo encuentro del ciclo de coloquios que hacemos en conjunto entre el Centro de Investigación de la Atmósfera, el Departamento de Ciencia de la Atmósfera de los Océanos y el Instituto Franco-Argentino para el Estudio del Clima y sus Impactos. Y bueno, este coloquio es especial porque lo estamos haciendo en colaboración, así que ya te dejo, Nicolás, para que me
¿Está la cámara que está funcionando? ¿Está la cámara que está?
Sí.
Okay, so I've been given the honor to introduce Sylvain. The presentation will be in English, but I will do the introductions in Spanish. Así que agradecemos a Sylvain y a Guillaume, que también está presente acá, pero que no va a presentar, y a los organizadores también de este webinar que se da en un contexto especial de una de las reuniones de CHIMERE, así que agradezco a los organizadores. Sylvain es investigador del Laboratorio de Meteorología Dinámica de la Escuela Politécnica de Francia. Hizo su doctorado y ha estado trabajando toda su carrera en modelación y es parte del equipo que está detrás del desarrollo de CHIMERE y de las aplicaciones y la investigación y el líder del proyecto CHIMSUR. Así que sin dilatarlo más, dejo con ustedes a Sylvain. Muchas gracias, Sylvain.
Okay. Do you have something to point?
Points?
Yeah.
Here.
This. Okay. Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. First, let me say that it has been a pleasure to be here for 3 days with Guillaume and with our colleagues from Chile and with our colleagues from Córdoba. We have felt very welcome in IFAECI and also in CITEDEF, all the sites that you have shown us around. So I'm here in the framework of this project, International Research Network CHIMSUR. It's a project that has just begun this year and it's funded for 5 years. And the idea of this project is to permit exchanges between French groups, Chilean groups, and Argentinian groups here and in Córdoba around the topic of atmospheric composition in South America and in particular Argentina and Chile, with the CHIMERE model, but not only with the CHIMERE model, because we have lots of people in the project who have shown us very interesting and promising measurement facilities that we can for sure couple very nicely with the modeling to do interesting studies. So I will do a general talk today. I will show you, first explain you what is the chemistry transport model, what is the CHIMERE model more specifically. Then, of course, time is short, so I will address 2 very specific points for which I think there is an interest to show them precisely here. The first one is about reducing the numerical diffusion in the model with new methods and applications. And I think in this area, there is opportunity to do comparison with measurement, in particular LIDAR data, to check that what we have in the model world also happens in the real world. Then I will show 2 examples of using CHIMERE for, well, yeah, 2 examples, but it's really like 2 examples in the same field of study of using CHIMERE for regional scale studies, studying the advection of black carbon pollution from the city of Santiago to the high mountains in the Alps, the glaciers and the high mountains that surround the city. So these are studies that were done in the framework of a PhD thesis for which I was co-supervising the thesis with Laurent Menu, who is a part of the project but couldn't be there this week, and studies that we also have developed with Nicolas Vineus and his group. And finally, I will conclude and try to give some ideas. So first, let me explain to those who don't know, which is usually a majority of people, what is a chemistry transport model. I'm sorry for those who were there yesterday. The slides are the same in this part, but I will change after. Don't go. So chemistry transport model is something that aims at reproducing the evolution of the concentration of one or several species of interest in the atmosphere. So of interest can have several meanings, can be of interest for human health, for pollutants like fine particles, nitrogen oxides, ozone that have a recognized impact on health. Can be impact on visibility, for example, for aviation. Can be also impacts on the climate system because all this stuff is interacting with the clouds and with the radiation and has climate and weather impact. So that's the aim of a chemistry transport model. For this, it needs to include chemical processes, solve many chemical reactions with the trace gases. It needs to take into account the emissions, of course, the anthropogenic pollutions from when we burn fuel, when we have the pollutant activities, but also the natural emissions from the forest, from the sea, from the arid areas. We need to include the transport processes because the things are emitted in one point and then they are free to move in the atmosphere along the wind and following also the mixing in the vertical direction. And finally, for many compounds, their life cycle terminates with deposition on the ground. That's the case of fine particles, for example. So this needs to be also represented accurately in the model. So the aim of knowing the concentrations of many species in the atmosphere forces us to take into account several kinds of processes. Meteorology, of course, the wind, the temperature, the sunshine, they are the ingredients that determine largely the type of chemical processes that happen in the atmosphere. Emissions, which are usually the critical and difficult part for us, both natural emission and anthropogenic emission. And the land use, the type of land, it also changes a lot emissions, it also changes deposition. Deposition doesn't behave the same above a forest, above the sea, above grassland, etc. So here I show one grid cell of a chemistry transport model. So inside this grid cell, you do the physics and the chemistry. So chemistry, nucleation is the formation of fresh aerosol. That's just one example of the several physical-chemical processes that we have to take into account. So that's what happens inside the box. And then we have what happens at the boundaries of the box. So the bottom boundary can be the ground. So from the ground, you have emissions from human activity and deposition because the particles are settling to the ground. And then you have the interfaces with the neighboring cells. So transport by the wind, both horizontal and vertical, and vertical mixing and turbulence, which is particularly critical because apart from knowing the emissions, knowing how the planetary boundary layer behaves is also a very critical part for chemistry transport modeling. So there are two possible configurations for a chemistry transport model. Ideally, a chemistry transport model should represent all this. This is a figure by the WRF-Chem developers. So it should represent the emissions, the formation and growth of aerosols, also the chemistry of trace gases, and it should also represent the interaction of aerosols with clouds and with radiation. So an online model, like for example, WRF-Chem, can allows the atmospheric composition to have a feedback on meteorology. We have the radiative effect of the aerosols, and we also have the effects of the aerosol on cloud microphysics. So we have we take into account a greater part of the atmospheric complexity in such model. We have possibly more physical insight. We can do more detailed study for the processes, but it's more difficult, more unstable, and more costly. And typically, it's used for case study and for research into the physical processes to understand what happens. On the other hand, the more traditional option is to do offline modeling. So you have already a meteorological simulation done by yourself or by a meteorological center, like a reanalysis. And with this, you take the temperatures and winds for granted, and you feed this into a chemistry transport model. And the chemistry transport model solves only what I've shown before: physics, chemistry, transport of the pollutants and deposition. So this is quicker and easier, so it's very popular, in particular for operational forecast, but it's also used for research purposes when, as soon as it's not critical to take into account the feedback effects. So CHIMERE has a particularity as a chemistry transport model to be able to be used both ways, online or offline. So the offline mode, you have done already a meteorological simulation with a meteorological model with these four things: land use, initial and boundary condition. You also have a knowledge of the emissions. You have also the chemical initial and boundary conditions for the model. And with all this, the input from meteorology, the emissions, and the initial and boundary condition, you run the chemistry transport model. And from this, you obtain 3D fields for concentration for all the species represented in the model. So that's a typical workflow for forecast. And an online model is pretty much the same, but we had a feedback between the meteorology and chemistry transport model. We not only have the forcing by wind, temperature, humidity, etc., from meteorology into the CTM, but we also have the feedback of the CTM, who provides concentration, but possibly also optical depth to the meteorological model, and both have to run at the same time and influence each other. So CHIMERE can do both of the things depending on the target process we want to study. Finally, a critical part in developing the model is to choose the region of study and to discretize the region of study. So here is an example about the biggest domain that can be done in CHIMERE. CHIMERE is the regional model, so you cannot simulate the entire atmosphere, but you can simulate huge areas like an entire hemisphere, which is already very big because the residence time of air in one hemisphere is 1 year, so you can study about everything by restricting the domain to one hemisphere. Then we also have to do a discretization on the vertical direction. So here, this bump represents a mountain going up to something like 4,000 meters. So the model levels, they follow the terrain. And a particularity of chemistry transport model is that you refine very much the resolution in the planetary boundary layer, because that's where you really want to have refinement. You have the emissions, you have the deposition, and you have the stakes for human health. So that's where you want really to have strong detail. While in the free troposphere, the scales in space are larger, so you can accept to have a not so refined vertical resolution, even though this generates problem also, as I will be showing later. So when you have done all this, the chemistry transport model will provide you estimates of 3D concentration for all the grid cells and all the entire volume from the surface to a certain altitude. And over an entire region, you can have estimates of concentration. Then, of course, we have to know how good these estimates are. So this has to be compared to real-world data. And with this combination of model and real-world data, try to provide useful information for health policies and also research into better understanding the processes that are at play. So the CHIMERE model is one example of chemistry transport model. There are many of them. Many countries develop their own chemistry transport model in the US, in Europe, and other parts of the world. So the specific history of CHIMERE has begun in 1997. It was developed specifically for the Paris area with a specific cutting of this area roughly following the French administrative limits of the neighboring departments. Then rapidly it has evolved into a model with a generic grid with square cell, like I've shown before, permitting to use it on other areas, at first in Europe and then anywhere in the world. And then during all these almost 30 years of evolution, is it 30? Yeah. Several processes have been added, mineral dust, aerosols. A big technical step was to jump from a sequential model to a parallel model to be adapted to current HPC infrastructures. Then we began a CNRS national tool, which means that we are recognized as a community tool, which is useful potentially for all the scientific community in the country. Other upgrades includes being able to simulate an entire hemisphere by relaxing constraints that were preventing from having the pole inside the domain. And a big step forward scientifically is to have the online cooking, so make the WRF CHIMERE system able to take into account the feedbacks between climate and air quality. And technically speaking, having this new input-output management permitted to strongly reduce the calculation cost of the model because there were bottlenecks at reading and writing files that we have suppressed using XIOS, which is an IBSL shared tool for input-output. This has been done by Romain Tenel, who is also a part of the project and couldn't be there this week. Okay. So applications of the CHIMERE model in France and Europe include the production of operational forecasts. So this is the national forecast produced by the Prévert Consortium, which is a joint consortium between several institutions, scientific and operational. So this provides concentration estimates for the entire country. And then in each of the 13 administrative regions in France, there is a regional air quality study association who is officially in charge of producing maps for their own regions and also other products that are more adapted to the general public and to communication with the public authorities. So they are in charge to do early warning for pollution peaks and advise the authorities on the possible measures to mitigate the peaks. So that's a very important implication from the point of view of public policies and general interest. Along with the measurement network, CHIMERE is a tool included for official advice to the authorities, actually mitigating the effect of pollution on health. I don't know if I mentioned it, but CHIMERE is also a part of Copernicus to do the forecast at European level, along with other models performed by groups in several countries. So this is the specific elements that correspond to the generic bricks before. So for each brick, like meteorology, emissions, boundary conditions, land use, we have to find a data set that is available and, if possible, high quality. So for land cover, we use USGS. We have several possibilities for boundary conditions, etc. I will go fast with this one, and usually there are several options at user choice. The point is to provide high quality of inputs as possible to permit the model to be in the best possible condition to provide good outputs. And then we perform all the calculations that were described before: deposition, transport, emissions, chemistry, and integration in time with a numerical solver. And then we obtain the target results of concentrations with space and time variations. The model is available to all on this website. The current version has been released a couple of months ago. And we have registered users in many countries, but of course it's difficult to know who is actually using the model and who has just downloaded it at some point. So we don't really know who is using the model, but we can see the publication that are citing the model. So that's one way to interact with people, and there are also mailing lists to interact with the CHIMERE community. I wanted to say something else. Yeah, concretely, Guillaume, along with the people running the Hydra facility here, have downloaded and installed CHIMERE on this facility. So it's available on the Hydra computer for anyone who wants to try their luck at simulating air pollution or specific processes like dust, sea salt, whatever, on a domain you can customize. It's not so easy to customize the domain, but when the compilation and everything is done, it's already easier. And we are available to exchange with you. In particular, we have a project which is here to enhance the use of CHIMERE in the region. So if someone is wanting to use and is having questions, we will be happy to do our best to answer. And also the people on the cluster are very helpful for the installation and the technical issues. Okay, then I will present a couple of recent studies done with the model. Am I not too late? Okay, I'm very late. So the first example is reducing numerical diffusion. So developing new methods and applying them to CHIMERE. Oops. Well, there, menu. Yes. Okay. So here is a slide that shows a problem. The problem is when you simulate a volcanic eruption, an April 2010 eruption in Iceland that had disrupted air traffic in France. It has been observed by the LIDAR close to Paris. Okay. It has been observed by the LIDAR close to Paris as a very thin layer of like 100 meters or a couple hundred meters thick. The model is simulated it correctly in place and time, but much too thick. So this gives us a problem to solve. There are studies in mathematics on how to solve correctly the advection equation. So we can try to improve that. I will show how we have managed to improve that in CHIMERE. So we don't know everything. So with a beer and discussing with a mathematician friend, he told me a possible method that is a new advection, not new because it's 1999, an advection scheme that has been developed in 1999 by French researchers and published only in France and was rather confidential. But he told me this has a high potential for the kind of problems I was looking to. So I developed this scheme, I implemented this scheme in the CHIMERE model. This is a figure from the original paper showing that with this scheme, you have one strong peak and you do advection forever like this in a periodical domain. So after a large number of time, with this scheme, you still have a very well-defined scheme, only on 3 grid points. And if you use other more traditional scheme, the peak is extremely smooth. So this scheme has very nice mathematical properties that ensure this. It also has drawbacks. It has order 1 accuracy only. And if you try to use it in 2D or 3D, it gives numerical oscillation that make it not usable. And one advantage is it's extremely simple to code. The code for the model is here, so it's like 2 lines in Python. In the model, it's in Fortran, but I put Python here. So the solution we thought of was to try to use it only on the vertical direction, because the vertical direction is where you have the larger amount of diffusion, because the layer is very thin, and use traditional advection methods on the horizontal direction. So we did 2 studies of that, but I will put just one example of the use of it. This is another case of volcanic eruption at the Etna volcano in 2012 that we did with Italian collaborators and with Mathieu Lachatre, who was a postdoc at LMD at this time. So here I will focus the analysis on this panel. Here is the evolution. It's similar to the LIDAR and to the LIDAR plots we've seen before. It's a time altitude diagram. So we see a general evolution of the plume and a very broad structure of the plume in the vertical direction. This is with a traditional advection scheme. And if we put the anti-diffusive advection scheme of the Pré-Lagouitière, we observe that the behavior is basically the same as they have shown in the idealized mathematical study. The plume is able to stay confined to a very small number of vertical points in the grid. Of course, it's also important to refine the vertical resolution. We see that if we put only 20 layers, no matter which advection scheme you put, you will have poor results. So putting more vertical layers and having this anti-diffusive scheme strongly mitigates the plume diffusion. Fine vertical resolution is also necessary. And if we do some quantitative comparison, like looking at this and this, we see that the quality is equivalent between both in terms of diffusion. So using this new advection scheme has the equivalent impact in terms of improvement to doubling the number of vertical layers. But using this advection scheme has no additional cost. So from a computational point of view, it's very interesting to see that we can have for cheap what we could have for a more expensive way. So there is a caveat in this study. We compared with satellite data, but we did not manage to have the detailed structure of the plume in satellite data. So we can just say that this solves a problem that is well known, but we are not able to say that on this precise case, we better represent compared to vertical data. And that's here where there is high potential to compare with LIDAR. You have many volcanic eruptions in the Andes, and you have many LIDARs with people processing the LIDAR signal. So maybe there is potential to check if we can observe fine volcanic ash layers and see if CHIMERE is able to capture the structure and maybe compare with other modeling methods. So that's one of the improvements in CHIMERE that I wanted to show. Another case is more close to answers on physical processes. So I will speak under the control of Nicolas because he was working on this and he knows the topic better. This was during the PhD thesis of Rémi Lapère, who defended in 2021, I think, something like that. Sorry. Was wondering when he defended his thesis, 21, I think, something like that. Anyway, that's not so old. So we had questions. We wanted to study how the pollution emitted in the city of Santiago, Chile, could affect the neighboring mountains. In particular, there is a canyon here entering the mountains, surrounded by snow and glacier areas at high altitude. And we wanted to answer where is all the pollution from the city able to reach these areas, or preferably the pollution emitted in some part of the city. So for this, we use a possibility of CHIMERE, which is to emit inert traces at any point you want. So we emitted traces from the downtown of Santiago, traces from the entrance of this Maipo Canyon, etc. And we've used the model to see where these traces are going and which ones are reaching the snow-covered areas. So here, this is the red points are the points where we have identified the cryosphere, snow, glaciers, etc. And we have seen that the emission points that are contributing the more to deposition here are these points at the entrance of the Maipo Canyon. Then we have done this is just to show how you can use CHIMERE to do studies that you could also do with trajectory models like FlexPath, simple studies to have qualitative information on where the things are going. So here it's like a heat map for two different periods of time with different conditions of where the tracers are going. And we are seeing that in this 3-day period, the tracer emitted here at the entrance of the canyon is clearly penetrating inside the canyon and going towards the mountain. Still, it is channeled by the canyon and we don't see it reach strongly the mountain, but if you look at the small concentration, it does. So this is a qualitative study, but that could be also with trajectory models. But CHIMERE is also a quantitative model that you can use with real surface emission. So this was done also by Rémi Lapère a bit later. Okay, this is the conclusion of the paper. He identified different weather regimes that imply a smaller or a stronger possibility of the tracer to enter into the canyon and the mountain. So this qualitative analysis permits to develop a kind of theory on which conditions are favorable to the export of the pollution towards the mountain. And then we can go to a more quantitative analysis that he did a bit later by simulating 1 month in summertime and 1 month in wintertime. Here we have on the left hand, the intensity of black carbon distribution. So it's close. Here is the vicinity of Santiago. So you have more black carbon deposition in the vicinity of Santiago. And here is a relative contribution of Santiago in July, so winter time, and okay, January, July. Okay, this is the amount and the relative contribution of Santiago for summertime and for winter time. So we see that in summertime, there is not a big amount of deposition, but the relative contribution of Santiago is very strong. In wintertime, there is more deposition on the snow, but it doesn't come from the city. It comes probably from local villages, cities, or traffic in the valleys. So what he has also identified in this quantitative study is that in summertime, the amount of deposition is weaker than wintertime, but it tends to reach higher altitudes on the glaciers, while in wintertime you have more deposition, but it's essentially confined to the lower altitude glaciers. So with this kind of more quantitative study, we can have more precise conclusions, and also go one step further, because CHIMERE was quantitative estimate of the flux that is deposited on the snow, and that can be compared with field measurement, which Rémi did and was happy about the result, but I'm not sure this is published yet. Wanted to do something with that. So you can go the entire way from very idealized study showing where the things could go to quantitative studies, estimated the flux and comparing it with field measurements. So this was the second example of application that I wanted to show, and I think is of interest for us because it concerns the area, the South American area in the mountains that are the border between Chile and Argentina. So in conclusion, CHIMERE is a model with constant evolution. We include new features, we include the technical and scientific improvements regularly. With this, we can perform different kinds of studies from all the way from idealized trajectory type studies to full modeling exercise. So here for one specific problem, but it's also has also been used for the Papilla project for simulations of the entire South America for longer periods of time. So with this tool that is very flexible, we can the application range from pollution study to more process-oriented study. So we can address a wide range of scientific questions related to anthropogenic emissions, related to volcanic emissions, related to mineral dust, to sea salt. We can address a big variety of scientific questions depending on the area and the model of the configuration. And finally, remind you that we have this project funded by CNRS for 5 years. And the goal of the project and the goal of our visit is to enhance the collaboration between the French, Chilean, and Argentinian partners on atmospheric in this region with the CHIMERE model, but not restricted to this. So with this, this is the last slide. So I thank you for your attention. If you have questions in English or Spanish, I can answer.
Thanks. You open this slide for questions.
Okay. So I'm not from this community, but I have curiosity questions. So would it be, did you go back to Chernobyl accident, for instance, and try to model that, maybe to find places that haven't been tested for potential affection?
The model can be used for isotope studies. We have used it not for the Chernobyl accident by itself, but for later resuspension of possibly contaminated dust close to Chernobyl, because the zone is still emitting radioisotopes when there is wildfires events or dust suspension events. and also for radioisotopes. It has been used, for example, to see if we can identify an impact. You had the French nuclear tests in southern Algeria up to year 70 or something like that. So you have areas where you have contaminated dust, and CHIMERE has been able to simulate the advection of contaminated dust towards continental France through the Mediterranean, and this was fitting with measures that detected this. So I don't know if this accident has been simulated. We are currently trying to do simulation with the Fukushima accident, but this is a tool that can be adapted for studies of isotope advection.
Well, next question is from Pedro, who is on the Zoom.
Hi. Thanks. So I have one question. That is, if your if the
Pedro,
model,
please.
¿me escuchan, Lean?
Sí, ahora sí.
So I have a question that if the model is sterile or it's alive, it has a biological component on the atmosphere or it does not. So but I'm intrigued. It's something that I'm intrigued and that about the biological component of the atmosphere. Mostly, what I understand is that bacteria is the component that has the potential to do some transformation, to have some activity, like from there are some bacteria that can do photosynthesis in the atmosphere and can transform some components, I guess mostly the biological component of the atmosphere. And while I was listening to your talk, I was curious if the CHIMERE has a module of biological activity, or if you think that it can be used, or there is some potential in there.
Okay, I don't know what is the current state of knowledge on the biological activity in the atmosphere, but I know that advection of microorganism or all kind of live elements can occur in the atmosphere, and there are possibly there are studies, but it's not yet in the model. But many biological elements are already taken into account in the model. First, well, we have the inert gases emitted by vegetation, but this is not really something alive anymore in the air. But more active things that are advected include pollens and mushroom spores in the atmosphere. So they do not, or at least we don't take this into account, that do not behave in an active way in the atmosphere, but we can try to model where they are emitted and where they are going and where they are deposited. Then live microorganisms, we don't take it into account yet, but we have begun to do some tracer studies to see if it's possible that this kind of organisms can travel in the atmosphere. But we haven't published something so far because we don't manage to match the model simulation with observation. But yeah, there is a topic with the possible advection of viruses, bacteria, other microorganisms. What is already done is pollens and fungal spores, and I don't know if I forget something else about live things. Okay, pollen and fungal spores are here. Things that could have biological activity in the atmosphere, we don't have it.
Excellent. So I was just looking at some papers on the literature where you were giving your exposition, and I saw that in a concentration of bacterial is mostly on top of continents, no? So it reduced, then the abundance of cell counts is mostly on top of continental surfaces, and then it reduced. So in maybe I was wondering if it can be useful to help to understand some discrepancies in continental versus marine chemical aspects or something like that. But thanks a lot, and thanks for the exposition.
Something that are alive and emitted on the sea act as a CCN, and there is a lot of topics with this, but it's in the modeling, we are only beginning with that.
Yeah, okay.
I have two questions, but in terms of the coupling with Earth, does it affect all the components of the atmosphere, let's say radiation, microphysics, with radiation, or it's just limited to certain parts of the atmosphere?
It can be customized. There are two types of interaction. First, CHIMERE can provide aerosol optical depths to WRF in both the visible wavelengths and long wave wavelengths. Then the radiative scheme in WRF, I think RRTMG usually, can take into account these LDs and change the radiative exchanges in the atmosphere, so that acts on temperature, etc. So that's one family of effect that we have. And the second family of effect that we have is the effect on cloud microphysics. In the Thomson aerosol-aware cloud microphysics, there is typically a kind of climatology of CCN, or something like that, a climatology. So we acted by making CHIMERE transmit to WRF numbers of CCN and ice condensation nuclei, and substitute the WRF climatology with these real-time CCN and ice condensation nuclei. So these are the two main effects, I think, and at least the two effects that are included in this copy. Also, the ozone has a feedback on the radiative balance, but it's rather weaker, but it's also taken into account.
The second one is that, is the CHIMERE limited to the tropospheric chemistry and also the stratospheric? It can be used to make the studies of the vortex, for example?
It's limited to the troposphere. If you want to do studies just of passive tracer advection, you could do it in the stratosphere, but the chemistry is not developed.
More questions?
It's really interesting to get to know the developers of such a huge model that has right now a lot of components. So can you tell us what you expect also as LMD and LISA laboratories to get from this kind of project to make the model grow?
Thing that we expect from the project, I can see at least two kinds of things. First, have access to nice measurements, for example, with the LIDARs to do detailed comparison for the vertical emissions and see if we are now able to do better than this comparison in terms of vertical structure. So find a recent event and so find measurements in order to qualify the development we are doing. And also the one other thing that is very important, I think, is we have usually tested and developed the model in Europe, and also with dust from the Africa and Arabian Peninsula. But Patagonia is not looking like the Arabian Peninsula, but it emits dust. But certainly the processes are a bit different. And when we tried the model out of the box to emit dust, for example, in the Atacama Desert, we had problems to have it work. So we have to understand the processes that are at play and see if we can improve some of the processes to make them work with the specific behavior of that we can observe in the region. And yeah, of course, it's also an opportunity to do more case study, because only doing case studies and comparison with observation, we can improve a model and know if it works fine, not only in the region we are testing it for forecast or whatever, but also in very different regions in the world. So I think that's a big opportunity for model development.
Well, I think that there are no more questions. Okay. So thanks a lot again.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Very nice.
Yeah, I don't know how to leave it.
Bueno, muchas gracias.